WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively headed into lots of fun. We got March Madness. We are going to be over at Costas on Friday from 2 until 5, or maybe a little later than that. I have talked Pete into making me the famous Burke's Crab Melt Costas style with the cheddar cheese. We're going to have hoops on. I've got friends coming by. Bill Cole says he's coming. My friend Marianne Scully from Howard Bank, formerly of Howard Bank, now in, I don't know, semi-retirement. I don't know where she's going to be. Mike Rosenfeld's going to be joining us. Rob Santoni from Wise is coming by. So it's going to be a party. It's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. We're going to let ourselves play. I have Betty Boop scratch-off tickets. It's just fun saying Betty Boop. It's more fun than saying Monopoly or Gold or like any of the other things. Luke Jones is here. It's fast, and you knew this. We talked about this on Sunday, that there would be rumors, there would be facts, there would be players, there would be signings, there would be unsignings. I mean, hell, Tom Brady came back. So, and by the way, I'm wearing my Liberty Pure shirt on the set, and I want to give a shout out to Doug Wharton, Kevin, Steve, the whole crew, for getting me clean water. I do appreciate that because, and you know who's going to appreciate that's Moeller, because I talk so much about water. For the Ravens, the early part of this thing, Monday is, hey, is DeCosta asleep? Tuesday is, he gave his safety $70 million, and oh, they got to right there tackle. Oh, look at Eric. He's like good at this. And then the ZaDarius Smith thing happens. And I saw the best meme ever. Have you seen the gold tooth cigar meme yet, Luke?
I did not see that.
Oh, I will share.
Man, you're scooping me on this.
Well, things happen here. I'll go in and make that happen for you, because it was world class. When I find it, I'll share it. But nonetheless, things are happening, not only in Owings Mills, but everywhere. I mean, this is when you love the NFL. God bless March Madness and the ladies March Madness, and spring training is sprung and they're putting games on Masson. But man, we all kind of hang on this. I mean, the whole country, this is the sports thing. Free agencies, this is a big week, man.
It really is. And I think the big theme on Wednesday was the edge rushers. We had talked about some of the guys earlier in the week. Emmanuel Agba stays in Miami, and we talked a little bit about Hassan Reddick, who ends up going home to Philly. And I had kind of said how I like that deal. But you look at some of the names that come off the board, or at least reportedly come off the board. I think it's important to remember that. We've seen the J.D. McKissick thing. We've seen a couple of deals here and there, which you always have with that tampering window. A couple deals will be agreed to, and then something happens. Guy wants more money. Something happens in terms of having a change of heart. They go back to their old team, whatever it might be.
By the way, I think I wrote about this in Purple Rain 1. I'm pretty sure that, the Ravens had an embarrassing press conference situation with the linebacker from the Cowboys.
Oh, it was a safety, Brock Marion, way back when. His shoulder was bad, right? Yeah. That was the story, yeah.
There have been players and signings and Xavier Hernandez's and all sorts of things. I mean, let's talk about ZaDarius Smith, because as a player and as a person, and clearly they've always loved him. Eric's always loved him. Joe, I mean, the whole brass has loved him. They brought him into the building, they watered him, they played him, and then they couldn't afford him anymore. More about the details of the salary cap 3 years ago, and what players were they? Were they were still eating Flacco's money at that point, I'm guessing, yeah. Right? So they just had no cap money, and they've done really well. Ozzie specifically, if you go back as a Hall of Fame executive, and he is one of the Hall of Fame executives, was always right player, right price. I mean, I wrote about it in Purple Rain too, how much he pissed off other agents and they hated him. You know what I mean? They would deal with him and players wanted to come and stuff, but Ozzie was difficult because you weren't going to move him off his number, and if you got your feelings hurt, that's kind of the way it rolled. And a lot of guys, left with some feelings hurt or whatever. And then there were a million, it felt like, Bart Scotts and Ed Hartwells and Jamie Sharp. I mean, I just go through the list of all these guys that went other places. This is not an organization that is afraid of letting ZaDarius Smith go and embarrass them by being a good player.
Yeah, and there haven't been a ton of guys like him. I mean, for many of the guys that you just mentioned, they got paid, and good for them. I mean, my gosh, this is a brutal sport. You need to get yours. And in many of these cases, you get one legitimate bite at the apple for that second contract. It is rare to really think about the guys who, okay, they might get a third contract, they might even get a fourth contract, but those typically are much more market friendly, team centric kind of deals where basically you're saying, hey, do you want to earn a couple more $1 million over the next couple years to keep playing? Or do you want to try to preserve your health? Or you've gotten to the point where they're constantly going to be looking to replace you. So in the case of Za'Darius Smith, who I'll remind everyone, his development was up and down. This was a guy who was a healthy scratch for 3 games late in his second season. You think about that now, a 4th round pick late in the 2016 season. And keep in mind, he was drafted really, I mean, that was that 2015 draft that the Ravens kind of went down and checked off the needs they had. Wide receiver.
I'm trying to think about who they had on the field instead of him. Doomerville? Like, I'm going back.
Doomerville, yeah.
I'm trying to think of why he didn't play and who played in front of him.
Well,
right?
he played. Remember, he had a strong finish to his rookie year. And remember, 2015 was the year Suggs tore his Achilles for the second time on opening day.
Flacco was hurt, right?
Yeah, they were 5 and I mean, that was the year everyone was hurt. I mean, as much as we talk about this year, 2015 was really 2021 before 2021. I mean, just everything went wrong, and they had lost some key guys the year before. One of those being Gary Kubiak, mind you, and Mark Trestman replacing him did not work out so well, to say the least. But Za'Darius Smith had a strong finish to his rookie year. Goes into 2016. To your point, they had Doomerville, although that was the year Doomerville. I guess that was the year he was playing with what turned out to be a partially torn Achilles tendon, and they didn't tell anyone until the end of the year. But you had that. You had Suggs coming back. So, I mean, I think there was a thought that Za'Darius Smith was going to step into a more extensive role. Not that he was going to be, quote, the guy, but I think there was a thought that, they're going to be counting on him. And, his 2016 season was very underwhelming, to the point where he was a healthy scratch late in the year. And you're kind of wondering, is this guy a bust? So he was better the following year. And then, of course, his contract year, as has been the case for so many guys in Baltimore specifically, he really blossomed and had 8.5 sacks. I think he had 25 quarterback hits. I'm looking at it right now. And the Packers come calling, 4 years, $66 million. Now, could the Ravens have made that work? Probably, if they really wanted to. But I think at that point in time, there's still that question of, okay, he popped in his contract year. Is this a case of him being an ascending player? Or is he having his career season and this is going to turn out to be not so great of a deal for Green Bay? And historically, you'd probably say the latter. But to his credit, he goes to the Packers and he had 26 sacks over his first 2 years. He makes 2 Pro Bowls. I mean, how many Ravens players have gone on elsewhere to make Pro Bowls and were better somewhere else than they were in Baltimore? That's a pretty short list, Nestor. I mean, there aren't too many guys you can say that about over the years, which again is a credit to Ozzie and the organization for gauging and projecting what you think players are going to be. I think years ago, Ed Hartwell thought he was better than Ray Lewis, or thought he was going to be better than Ray Lewis. And he was one of a few guys that goes elsewhere and you kind of see, well, maybe he was so good in Baltimore because he was playing next to Ray Lewis. So that's where you do credit Za'Darius Smith. And I think is a difficult situation for him. Green Bay did not want to let him go. They would have liked to have kept him, but we've seen what their cap situation is like and how much money they're giving Aaron Rodgers now and how much money they're going to have to give Devontae Adams if they want to keep him. And, you get to a point where some of these teams that are a little more veteran laden, they have a quarterback that has been paid and paid really well for a really long time. We've seen it in New Orleans where, hey, the Ravens have Marcus Williams right now because the Saints have been in cap jail the last few years. And last year they lost Trey Hendrickson. They lose Marcus Williams this year. Everyone kind of, I hear some people say the salary cap is a myth. And look, theoretically speaking, yes, you can continue to push money into the future. There's no question about that. And you can continue to do voidable years and restructures and all those different things.
And by the way, in half the league, at least half the league, if not 2/3 of the league, the general manager doesn't think he's going to be sitting there in 2024 to worry about paying the bill. And a lot of times this is some sort of, and I'll be at the owners meetings next weekend. This is an issue for management, for Steve Bisciotti to say, this is the way the franchise is going to live, right? Not the way our general manager is going to riverboat this to keep his job or, to win that second playoff game so that he doesn't get canned, because we've seen African-American coaches get fired after winning seasons, right? But when it comes to management and managing the cap, the Ravens are different than anybody else because Eric feels like he's going to have the job 5 years from now. Whether he is or not
Yeah.
remains to be seen, but he lives life. He manages his team budget as if it were his own. And that's not the case in most places, really deep down. Deep down, it's I got to win now. My coach has to win now. My quarterback has to win now. My offensive coordinator, we need to win now because we haven't won around here in a long time.
Yeah, but I agree with everything you just said, but I would also say when you do have that stability, I think that's also an opportunity to pick those spots to be a little more aggressive and to push some money into the future if you think it really maximizes your potential to win now. I think there's a balance between that. I think you certainly want to have a view of the long term, but I also think there are times to be a little more aggressive. And I think what we've seen this week, Nestor, is a perfect example of that. I mean, you consider, and I understand not all of it's guaranteed. Certainly not all of it's going to apply to the salary cap in 2022. And a lot of it's not going to be seen by these players ultimately, but they've given up over 120 million in contract commitments over the first few days of free agency. Now, it's not all guaranteed, of course, but that is very un-Ravens-like when you think about it. I mean, this is kind of unique territory to give out contracts to Marcus Williams for $70 million, Morgan Moses, 3 years, 15. Okay, that's a very Ravens-like move there. And then, the initial reports with Za'Darius Smith as far as, 4 for 35 and, their max contract value and whether there's some tweaking and different things that go on there. And, he might look at and see some of the other deals out there and, you see how much Chandler Jones got with the Vegas Raiders, and you see how much Von Miller's getting with the Bills, even though there were some silly numbers reported early on with that. He's not actually getting 120 million, but you always get that max value that agents like to have out there because it makes them look good. But
God, it's a week for this is absolute gaslighting. BS on the money. I mean,
well,
the money is just
sure.
It's monopoly.
But both, I would also say both sides do some of that as well, but certainly the agent side is going to.
If you're an informed fan and get the real numbers, right?
Don't go there. Go to overthecap.com is far more accurate. So, sorry, that's a pet. Not you. I'm just saying that's a pet peeve because a lot of people kind of view that one, and I see a lot of inaccuracies with that. But the overall point I was making though is we are seeing a more aggressive Eric DeCosta, more aggressive Ravens front office here to start free agency. Now, that's not to say that they're not going to be looking for more and more value signings, and you see what happens. I would assume because they began the week with just under 16 million in cap space, they're probably done as far as major moves unless they start restructuring some other deals, and they're probably going to have to do a little bit of that anyway.
Where does Lamar come into this? Where does Eric call Lamar next week and say, look, here's you've seen the market, let's get something done here. And again, this is so unorthodox.
Weird.
Yeah, unorthodox. Well, that's Marty Conway's word. And he told me about the Orioles when they do something that's batshit. Batshit here we call unorthodox.
Yeah.
So unorthodox. But it is batshit to not have an agent. This is. But what that relief could look like for them. But I mean, to me, they're all eyes are on the draft after this, right? Like once the clearance of this happens and they figure out where Bradley Bozeman and I saw Anthony Averett got his money, right? Like we talk about
only a little though.
But that's a sandwich deal trying to set up. I'm going to come and play hard and get 80 million next year. That's I think I'm a superstar and give me $4.5 million and changes my life. That's a smart agent. I don't know Anthony Averett at all, never spoken to him, but that seemed to be something that was pretty grown up, like that more guys should be thinking about that if they want to bet on themselves.
Well, and it just comes down to it. I mean, you look at these free agent lists, Nestor, and I was as guilty of this as anyone kind of looking at the Ravens group of free agents. I mean, let's look at this practically speaking. Calais Campbell's a 6-time Pro Bowler. Don't get me wrong. Great player, kind of guy who will at least be talked about as far as consideration for the Hall of Fame when it's all said and done. I mean, he has that kind of a long profile and
I
resume.
think we're getting to the point now too with the Hall of Fame where being a good human and being that,
I mean, I think we got to be careful with that. But
I know the voters. I'm telling you where we are right now. The next 15 years, not being a scumbag and being perceived as a really good human will help his cause in a way that he's an exemplary human, and for that'll help him.
Right, but the point I was trying to make is he's turning 36 in September. You're not giving him a 5-year contract. You're not giving him that monster deal that he got with Jacksonville, several years back. So you have him. I mean, Bradley Bozeman, I think it's been evident, regardless of the resolution for that, I think there was very much a lot of chatter. And, again, this is where you consider, okay, who's an agent for a player? How much do they talk to media? And I'm not talking about anyone specifically, just generally speaking. I think it's clear that the market for him was not as robust as it appeared. It only takes one team, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but you kind of look at how it plays out. But you go down the list, those two guys, I mean, Bozeman had only started at center for 1 year. He was a left guard before that. Patrick Ricard, he's a 3-time Pro Bowl fullback, but he's a fullback. There's only a handful of teams in the league that really value that in today's game. So you have him, Averett, who, as you mentioned, a guy that I think, he was the de facto number 1 corner by season's end with Marlon Humphrey out for the year in December. But again, not a lot of starting experience there. So you kind of go down the list of their free agents.
The Ravens didn't see him as $4.5 million, right?
Yeah. What was his asking price 2 weeks ago relative to what the market was? And then, as I mentioned, the Ravens giving out some of the contracts they've given out. You can't pay everybody. You would love to, but you can't do it. And you get to a point where you just kind of say, all right, we're moving on. I think now when you kind of look at how they've addressed offensive tackle, although I still think that's a position you need to look to on day 2 because you don't really have that long-term backup question about Ronnie Stanley if he can't go or if he's a shell of himself and has to be cut in a year or two. So I still like offensive tackle in the draft, but I look at corner. Okay, you have Marlon Humphrey. That's the one guy you say, okay, he's going to be here for the next 3-4 years at the very least. But Marcus Peters is in a contract year. He's going to be 30. He's coming off of a serious knee injury. He already hadn't been quite as good in 2020 as he was in 2019. That's why I disagree with a lot of people out there saying give him an extension. And I understand you can lower his cap number, but that's a guy I want to see what he looks like on the field before I'm going to sign up to extend him for a couple more years. So I think corner is one of those positions. I still think pass rush, even with the Za'Darius Smith addition, and I think the big question with him, and that's why until anything's official, I think that's one that you do have to take a little more pause. He missed all but 2 games last year with a back injury that he had surgery for. So he did get back for that San Francisco playoff loss. He did have a sack in that game for the Packers. That was very good to see, but I'm not, no conspiracy theory here or anything like that. I'm just saying you have to look at it pragmatically and say, at least acknowledge that. And I think that's one reason you kind of look at the reported numbers initially compared to what some other guys got. And, you just take some pause until everything's officially official. We know that because there have been cases, whether it's a health thing like Michael Brockers a couple years ago, or we've seen it elsewhere, not really with the Ravens per se, but guys will agree to terms when it's that tampering time, and then things change, or someone else comes calling, or someone has cold feet, or they decide, I really don't want to leave this place. So it's where you take a little pause and make
Gary
sure.
Baxter.
Yeah, sure.
Him on right there's a great example, right?
No question about it.
At the McDonald's, like the whole deal, right?
No question about it. And here we have what going on 2 decades later. We're still talking about the Cleveland Browns not having any clue, with everything going on with Mayfield and looking like he's going to be gone regardless, and them trying to get Deshaun Watson and what that means for your organization. We can talk about the Ravens and any problems they might have from time to time, but I think right now in this division, it's a very clear haves, meaning the Ravens and Cincinnati, and the have-nots. Pittsburgh, not in terms of turmoil, but look at their quarterbacks they have right now. And Cleveland is, they're Cleveland. They're still the Browns. They won a playoff game 2 years ago. God bless them. for that, I guess, but they're still a team that does not look like they have it figured out. And
Dude,
we'll see how it
you
plays
sit there
out.
pooping on the Browns, and I'm looking at the Oriole Bird right over your
Well,
shoulder. So, there is that. It is baseball
well,
season.
yeah, and now we're talking about Adley Rutschman not being ready for opening day, and a tricep strain, and you don't want to be alarmist about it. I mean, hopefully it truly is just that, and he'll be up in first few weeks of the season, late April, whenever it is, early May. But beyond that, I looked at this, and now since you brought up the Orioles, I got to do my little 2-minute rant here because it's not
Go
worth more than
ahead,
2
man.
minutes.
We got nothing but time.
But
By the
I
way,
look
Luke's
at
rant's brought to you by Royal Farms. I had a delicious piece of fried chicken last night and Western fries. I have a little toaster oven that I've been using, and man, I bring stuff home and it just puts a little edge on it. No. Anyway, go ahead. The Western fries were good.
And what bothers me is I look at where they are right now, and look, there are things to like, and we're going to see Adley Rutschman this year. There's a good chance we're going to see Grayson Rodriguez this year. I think there's a good chance we're going to see DL Hall this year. I mean, some of their best prospects, we're getting to that point where we're going to start seeing them, and that's great. Good, you want to start seeing those guys. But at the same time, I look at the state of the current roster at the projected opening day lineup. And in 2022, and maybe this changes, and maybe they will sign Carlos Correa, and it changes the entire complexion of their infield. Not holding my breath, sarcasm noted here. But I look at someone like Kelvin Gutierrez, and look, I don't want to pick on him, but for this thing to now be going into year 4, and he's your projected opening day third baseman, and you look at his career numbers, albeit limited major league experience, but also even look at his minor league numbers, and I'm looking at this guy and I'm saying, I don't think he's as good as Rio Ruiz. And we're talking about this in 2022 now. It's not 2019 anymore. That's where I kind of look at this thing and say, do they really need to be this bad? And we've talked about this with the draft. I mean, as far as number 1 pick and how the Orioles have very clearly had, modeling with their draft picks that they've really leaned much more college hitter, which I'm fine with. Hey, the draft, if you have predictive data that you say, hey, go with this guy, even if other teams don't love him quite as much. I like that. I like the idea that it's not groupthink in that way.
That's one of the things that Mydell and Elias that I will cede to you, Alan, Moeller, anybody, anywhere on the wing of hopeful or rightful apologist. I will say this, whatever they've done the last few years, it's better than whatever they were doing because at least they have a plan. Now, whether it's going to work or a guy's arm's going to fall off or his triceps is going to get sore, or like whether, you're going to water the next Matt Wieters or the next Joe Mauer or next Johnny Bench or the next Drungo Hayeswood or Jim Fuller, or Bob Baylor. I mean, I've been doing prospects forever. So to me, it's just that. And that doesn't make me cynical, but it does make me take pause to say what you say is, do they need to be this bad? Because I woke up at 3 a.m. today, and I have people like, West Coast people, it shows up on my timeline. I looked at what the Dodgers are doing, right? And look, I have a Dodger hat. I'm not a Dodger fan. I love Janet Marie. She works there. I love Dodger Stadium. It's a thing, right? But I'm not like rooting for the Dodgers or whatever. I'm rooting for having a Dodger dog at Dodger Stadium one night on a beautiful night. But they're trying to win. You know what I mean? Like, there is a difference. And there's 32 teams this week in the NFL. And we just sat here and had a very cogent conversation about one of the 32 teams, and even Cleveland. And when Detroit gets Baker Mayfield, they're all going to be trying. They're not
for the most part. For the most part. I mean, there are a few teams that, you go into a year or two period. I mean, Seattle right now. I mean, if Drew Lock's really going to be your quarterback, you're not trying to win. I mean, you're just not. You can say you are, but you're not. But the point I was trying to make with all of that was, if you have predictive modeling to go and trend a little more towards college hitters, does it really matter that you have to be 1-1, 1-1-5? Probably. I mean, that was kind of the thing with Colton Cowser and Heston Kjerstad. They weren't considered to be the top guy on the board. Now, the talking heads and pundits and outside draft prognosticators, everyone gets stuff wrong. I mean, Mel Kiper's wrong all the time. Todd McShay's wrong all the time. Daniel Jeremiah, who is literally a former NFL scout, is wrong all the time. So that's not to say that the Orioles should just be in line with what everyone else thinks in terms of who 1-1 should be. But the point is, if you do have some conviction and maybe you are off the beaten path a little bit, then do you really need to be so bad that you have to get 1-1? And I guess you could say your bonus pool and they have had some overslot guys and things of that nature. But the point I'm trying to make is, can you be in a position where, yes, you are still going to lose, and no, you're not pushing all your chips into the middle of the table, but at the same time, you bring in another veteran pitcher or two to stabilize your rotation. I mean, we talked about this last year. It's not even so much for me that it was so bad. It was so bad to the point that you had no options, that you had to keep throwing Keegan Aiken and Dean Kramer out there, even though they weren't pitching well enough that they deserved to be in a major league rotation. It's one thing for a guy to have some growing pains. It's another thing where he's just getting completely lit up.
Now you're taking options away too. I mean, we talked about the new contract and stuff.
Oh, sure.
Once a guy's up and you stink, there's no.
It's
an incentive to do that.
It's actually why I didn't. Don't get me wrong. This is not me patting them on the back for the Jordan Lyles signing, because I mean, this is a guy who had a 5 ERA last year. I mean, he is the epitome of back end of the rotation innings eater, and he's had a couple okay seasons, but I like the signing from the standpoint of it's one guy that he might throw 165 innings for you, and that's just going to let the rest of your rotation exist a little bit better, survive a little bit better. I'd like another guy like that, and if they pitch well, flip them in July. That there's a middle ground between being the Dodgers and doing what the Orioles have done the last few years. And I just feel that there have been some missed opportunities for them to take on a little bit of salary here and there, whether it's a signing, whether it's a trade, and you get a prospect along with the guy that has a bad contract, and then flip. I mean, we've seen Billy Beane do this with Oakland for years, where they'll take on a guy where you say, really, the A's sign that guy, and they use him for a year, and then they trade him and they get a couple prospects. And so I feel that there could have been a little more middle ground over these last couple of years. And I just look at this thing and say, to still be trotting out someone like Kelvin Gutierrez at third base. And again, he's an example. I don't want to pick on the kid. And, by all accounts, it seems like they like him as far as he's a hard worker, pretty good defensive player at third base, but nothing about his hitting profile leads you to believe that this guy belongs in an opening day lineup. And at this point, barring changes, he's going to be in an opening day lineup. But I just feel 4 years into this, and again, it doesn't mean you have to go sign Carlos Correa, but as I kind of said to you at the end of last year, I feel like this could be the point in time where you start making that JJ Hardy acquisition, for example. The Orioles did that in 2011. They still stunk in 2011, but look at how important Hardy was for those winning clubs to follow after that. So, when do you turn that switch on? That's my question at this point, and better be getting close to it, because if not, you start getting into that territory that teams like the Pittsburgh Pirates have been in for years, where they're rebuilding and you talk about these prospects, but you're always 2 or 3 years away. I agree with you, and this is where I credit Mike Elias and Sig Mejdal. There is a very much more defined plan in terms of what they have done in building up their system, what they're trying to do in Latin America, having an academy at the Dominican, and we'll see how the potential international draft impacts all of that. But they're clearly doing those things, and it's going to take time. And that's why by no means was I expecting 2022 to be Orioles becoming World Series champions. But there's certain elements of this that I feel they could have been speeding up the process a little bit, being a little more aggressive, picking some spots here and there to take on a little bit of salary, make a trade here or there, buy a bad contract to get a prospect with that bad contract that you take on. That I'd like to see them do a little bit more of that, instead of this just being just the extreme opposite of what the Dodgers are doing, or what the Yankees historically did. Although hearing the George Steinbrenner's sons talk about a payroll and how they proceed, it really is eye-opening to think how much things have changed. As I said to you during the lockout,
it's been tough on the Steinbrenners. Yeah.
How the Yankees have essentially the same payroll that they did 16 or 17 years ago tells you how much the economic part of the sport has really changed, and how even the richest teams are kind of viewing that CBT as a hard cap, save for the Mets, the Dodgers, and a couple others, but the Yankees and the Red Sox showing some fiscal responsibility. Who would have ever thought?
Luke Jones is here. He is showing some sleep responsibility. He's been up all night reporting on Raven stuff all week, from ZaDarius Smith backwards through Morgan Moses and Marcus Williams, beginning to learn all the new players and all the new numbers. All of it brought to you by our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions, taking care of your water needs, any water need you have, plumbing needs, or cleaning your water up, making your water taste good and be safe. I'm going to be talking more about that around here. Also going to be talking about the Maryland Crab Cake Tour, brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. We are doing Costas on Friday, and then we will be at Fadley's at Lexington Market on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to getting down there and looking around. Also seeing Dear Evan Hansen this weekend down at the Hippodrome, encouraging everyone to get back into the city, spend some money, spend some good times, and as the spring sprungs, be safe out there with all this St. Patrick's Day and March Madness mayhem. I'm Nestor. He's Luke. We are WNST AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.